Thank you for joining us for The Drive Back, the movie podcast where we imitate our favorite thing to do after a movie, which of course is to talk about it on the ride home. I'm Garrett, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Adrian.
Hey there.
And today, we thought we'd change things up a little bit. Since we hit a milestone of 50 episodes, we thought we'd introduce a new episode type. Right, Adrian?
That is correct. Today will mark the landmark historic day that will go down in history forever and ever. This is our first episode called First Timers. And this is going to be the kind of the episode dedicated to watching films that both of us have not seen. So we're trying to kind of make a little bit more of a distinction there. So whenever we have these episodes, both of us will be watching this movie for the first time and kind of reacting to it blindly to each other. But I'm pretty excited about it.
Absolutely. So am I. And to kick it off, we have a big one. A big movie that we have neither of us ever seen. That's going to be the 1988 anime film Akira. So all of this coming up on the drive back. All right, so a brand new episode type kicking it off. Make sure that you follow us on all of our social medias and like, comment, and subscribe because we got some other new types of episodes that are going to be coming over the course of the next month. So stay tuned for those. But let's go ahead and kick off our first timers with Akira. Released in 1988, it was directed by Katsuhiro Otomo and stars Mitsuo Iwata, Nozumu Sasaki, and Mami Koyama. I hope I am pronouncing those correctly. A secret military project endangers Neo-Tokyo when it turns a biker gang member into a rampaging psychic psychopath who can only be stopped by two teenagers and a group of psychics. So, as we have done for the last 50 episodes, let's go ahead and get our spoiler-free thoughts out of the way before diving into spoilers, because I feel like there is a lot that you can spoil with this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Especially for those of us who haven't seen it before. Adrian, this was obviously both of us our first time. What did you think after first viewing?
Yeah, after the first viewing, I was actually just really shocked at how much this mirrored my actual life. No, I'm just kidding. This movie is very crazy. It's definitely a roller coaster. I had heard so much about this movie going into it. So it had a lot to live up to, for sure, in terms of it's like known as the like precursor to all cyberpunk that we have nowadays. It's very, very influential in animation and just basically all around. It's just a very well-regarded movie, so it had high expectations, and my spoiler-free is that it definitely lived up to them. There was a lot that this movie offered, and it delivered it all excellently. It was really, really impressive.
Yeah, I went into this with a different expectation and was completely surprised by what I got. I had seen coverage of this movie for a very long time. I'd seen footage, and I not once ever had any idea of the major storyline that goes on with the character Tetsuo.
Me either. Yeah.
I thought it was just a biker gang movie set in a cyberpunk world, and I was very much mistaken.
No spoiler.
I know, we'll talk about more when we get into spoilers, but I will say at first, like at the first couple minutes after watching the movie, I was disappointed. Initially,
That's fascinating.
because I think it's because one of those things where you're overhyped and you have such a different expectation of what it's going to be,
Absolutely.
and then you get it and it's different. But after thinking about it, watching some other analyses and people talking about how important it is and why it's important, yeah, it's a fantastic film. I mean, it's no stranger to the fact that any anime film we've put on this channel has been one of the better ones because, it's a really good way to try and get people into an art form that a lot of us don't watch here in the West. So,
Yeah. Totally.
but let's go ahead and drop spoiler warning for Akira. We're going to be spoiling the movie. It is available to watch on Hulu if you have a Hulu subscription in both the sub and dubbed versions. What did you watch it in? Did you watch it dubbed or subbed?
I watched it dubbed.
Oh, very interesting. I watched it in Japanese. So,
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I like subtitles. I watch it with everything else. I just, for ease of viewing, I kind of was watching it in between work, so I didn't want to have to like read for 2 hours.
Oh yeah, and I think if you are going to watch this for the first time, maybe dubbed would be better, especially if you're getting into.
Yeah, if it's your first foray into this kind of thing, for sure.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and drop spoilers. Yeah, no idea about any of the psychic storyline in this, and it really took me off guard.
Yeah, I had no clue. I mean, it was kind of one of those things where it started to happen, and I was like, oh, maybe I just didn't know this, but it sounds like it's just never talked
I
about.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the other thing too is the main fact that like so much media has been around Kaneda's bike, the iconic red motorcycle.
Totally.
It was
Yeah.
in Ready Player One. It was there was a reference. I think one of the vehicles in Cyberpunk 2077 was a version
Yep.
of Kaneda's bike. And Kaneda's like the poster child for this movie. He's not the main character.
Not at all.
Tetsuo is. So
I mean, yeah, they're definitely both like if he's not the main, he's right under main character.
yeah, because like in all the storylines and stuff, all the plot like summaries and things I was reading for the movie to try and get the perfect one for this, Tetsuo is the main character they always say, and he's
Yeah.
first on the cast list. So I don't know where people are like maybe because he was more marketable than the guy who kind of becomes a villain.
Say so. Just like with the whole bike and everything, like you can't really market what happened, but you can market the merchandise and the look, right? The red tracksuit kind of look and
Oh,
that
yeah.
whole thing.
But so now that that's kind of out of the way, what do we think about the overall story and like the plot and character specifically? Because I think it's for me at least, it's I don't want to say it's disappointing because again, I was expecting a biker gang cyberpunk movie. But I do think, and even for me, and I don't watch a lot of anime. I do watch anime here and there. This was a little weird at points. And and that's coming from someone who loves the movie Paprika, and that movie is very much weirder than this, but it felt right compared to this. I don't know.
I'm so interested. So for me, I really liked this movie. To
No,
me,
I
it
really
felt,
like it too. Don't get me wrong.
yeah. To me, I feel like I related this to a movie that I've talked about on this podcast before, but is very underrated, at least in my circles, is the movie Appleseed, which is an older animation film, and it just reminded me a lot in terms of like feel and style to this. I think it was maybe a decade or so after, but it felt similar, and it also had some kind of things that were a little odd, but that just for me comes with the knowledge that I'm watching a different type of film. So I'm super curious to what you thought was odd or what you thought was weird or out of place.
It was more so like the first time when Tetsuo is in the hospital and he has the vision of like the teddy bear and the car
The
and
little
all that,
toys,
which
yeah.
that's fine, that made sense, and it makes sense in hindsight because it was children that were making those images.
Communicating.
What was
yeah.
weird to me is that the children that are the experiments or whatever are like super aged, and they never give a reason why. At least not that I saw. Maybe because it was the subbed version instead, but it was just kind of a weird aesthetic to kind of throw on the movie. I feel like if it didn't have that aspect and just was more, perhaps, and maybe this just to me would have been more interesting, having the child that crashes Tetsuo's bike die, and that power transfer onto Tetsuo, and he be the only kid. There's no other kids. Would have been more interesting and a little more dark and grounded. And I think that the child aspect and the kind of whimsical nature of that part was a little thematically weird.
I could see that.
Stylistically weird, I would say, not thematically.
I can see that. I also, we do have to view it through this lens, but I think we are viewing it with having the back knowledge of a lot of plot lines and a lot of movies that have been inspired by this. So it might be easier to look back and say, it would have been cooler if they did this, but I do have to give this movie credit because it was probably one of the first to even do anything remotely like this.
Oh, absolutely.
So like the whole like the children plot and kind of that magical aspect of it, as well as the horror aspect and the supervillain aspect, like all that stuff was kind of the first time that had been done, at least as far as I know. But I can see how that was a little odd. I think the movie might have been even weirder though if they didn't style the children to be old. Like if they were just normal children. To me, I guess what I could assume, if I had to kind of just speculate, is the way that the body dysmorphed at the end into
Mm-hmm.
that large big creature, maybe the power is morphing them. Like
Oh
it
yeah,
takes so much energy to control it that they age faster. That's
yeah.
I guess my theory.
Yeah, I see that kind of, and I kind of gathered that it was some sort of body morphing that was happening because of the power
Sure.
involved, but it was just kind of one of those weird things. It doesn't affect my score for the movie in any way. It's just kind of a weird standout. Everything else, though, was, I would say, pretty amazing. And I do want to talk about the animation because this is a movie from the 80s, 40 years ago almost now, and it looks like it could have been done today. And the only thing that's weird though, and it took a little bit to get used to, and I don't know how much anime you've watched
A good
outside of the
amount.
Ghibli films, but like the faces in this movie are a different style than a lot of other
Definitely.
anime. They're smaller faces on the actual head, and it's a little weird to get used to, I would say, in terms stylistically, but they do have much more expression.
Yeah.
They're the faces and the movement in this is so well animated that it is absolutely incredible, and it's hard to think that there were no computers during this time that they could have
Yeah.
done this with.
Which is I think that's where you can tell that it's dated because even if you were to replicate this in an engine today, it would not come out in a good way as rough as this movie looks. Like the edges are definitely hand drawn. You can just tell that it's an older type of animation. But one thing I have to give this movie absolute kudos for is the level of detail in every single shot surpasses some of the animation we get today.
Oh yeah,
I mean, there was such attention to detail in every single frame of this movie that if you're looking, whether you're looking at the main characters or in the background, there is like full signage written out, not just scribbles to fill in the words. Like there are actual letters in a background billboard, like down the street.
yeah,
It really helps to make the world feel alive because there's things that are moving everywhere, not just a hand drawn backplate. I mean, there's lights going on and off in the background. It's the level of detail was astounding. It was
yeah.
really impressive.
And that kind of leads into one of my other things I want to talk about, which is the world building for this, which is awesome. I think that there's a lot of show and not tell, which is very good, especially the initial shots when they first get on their bikes at the beginning of the movie and you hear like the drum music and it does those like panning skyline shots and you see the ads and you see the skyscrapers is absolutely incredible. Kind of showing these student riots in the background, which, I mean, kind of mirrored a lot of stuff over the last 40 years. It's kind of scary how close it was getting. But one of the biggest things, and I don't want to say it's affecting my score, but it kind of is, very very minutely, is the fact that this is praised as being next to Blade Runner for starting these like really kind of nailing the cyberpunk genre, and I think through my own consumption of cyberpunk related media, primarily Cyberpunk 2077, art and music, and like the Cyberpunk tabletop role playing game that the new video game is based off of, this doesn't really feel cyberpunky to me outside of the bikes and a couple of the vehicles. It just kind of seems more near future-y. Because you don't get, there's no robotic limbs, there's no, like kind of technological advancement that's very kind of much more further in the future. It's kind of just more, I mean, again, it was a product of the 80s, so it was like, and it's kind of this dual perspective, right? Like this was supposed to be the future of the 80s, right?
It was supposed to be 2019.
Yeah, which, well, let's say I'm glad that didn't happen to Tokyo. I really want to visit it. But like now, when we look at the cyberpunk and that kind of future aesthetic, we look back to the 80s, which is very interesting to me. So I think what's affecting my score is a kind of a disappointment in the cyberpunk nature, which has been so hyped up for this movie, and just kind of feeling let down by, I guess, the part of the style, which is kind of, it's weird to say. It's only affecting my score a very little bit because it's a personal thing, but
I can also see. I actually completely agree with that. It definitely feels a little more near future. However, my kind of devil's advocate coming out would say that we've gotten movies and games that are very over cyberpunk. Like they take the aesthetic and they absolutely turn it to 11. Because that's the aesthetic, right? That's cyberpunk.
Yeah.
And for a movie being the first, I feel that had they gone full cyberpunk, it may have been unapproachable and not relatable at all.
Yeah.
Because like you think for the time that this came out, there were floating screens and like cell phones and stuff in this movie basically. And had they gone too far, like say they had like earpieces kind of thing, that might have just been like not relatable at all. People wouldn't have grasped that concept. So I can see it being credited as a forager in the cyberpunk genre because it was one of the first. It's certainly not the best.
Yeah, and
I would say it was early, not perfected.
I think your devil's advocate point is actually going to be negating my point off, because I do think you're right. It has to be a building point. It has to be a foundation for something to be built off of. So I agree with that. That actually, you're changing my score before I even mention it.
Tell me what it is. Wow.
Well, not yet. We're not at the end yet.
Something that I really did want to talk about too is I feel that this movie definitely did the Snyder Cut music thing, where they played that one song that was like, oh, oh, probably like 50 times in this. That's the whole song, by the way, for those of you listening. It's literally, it's literally someone just going, oh, and they played it at any dramatic point ever. And it just got to be like almost comical, where it would come on and I'd be like, there's that noise, something's happening.
But I feel like it was used to highlight the psychic moments.
Yeah.
That specific theme. Because there was also the kind of more percussive, like the the one that plays when they're on the bikes and stuff. And that's kind of more the bike gang theme.
Yep.
But the music is not a standout of this movie, I would say. It's
very repetitive.
I don't remember any of the themes except for that the one you have said is the Snyder Cut version, which I guess the Snyder Cut's just going to become the butt of all of our jokes here on the show.
Specifically for me, for the music, because I understand having like a main theme to your film. I mean, you look at Inception or Interstellar, like there's themes and Dunkirk to those movies, but each time that theme comes up, it's changed slightly, whether it's like a piano version of that song or it's like a more rock version of that same series of measures. And this movie just continuously repeats the exact same bars.
Yeah.
For all of its different scenes. Like, it doesn't change anything throughout the movie, and it just, you can totally tell that it's the exact same music repeated.
Yeah, and if the reasoning is that the budget that would have been put into the score was put into the animation, I will take it.
Sure. It's always going to come back to the animation with this movie, because it really does stand out. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to kind of highlight? Any critiques, any positives?
For me, I mean, I guess I watched it subbed and then forgot that I had the choice, but I thought the voice acting was really good.
You mean dubbed?
Dubbed, yeah. I watched it dubbed, and I didn't know that I could watch it subbed. I had forgotten that, like, halfway through the movie, so I just thought that the voice acting was really, really good in this dubbed version. And yeah, I will say that I guess it's like the Foley work for all of the bikes and everything, and all the fight scenes and the punching and stuff worked really well for me. It totally kept me in the movie. I didn't feel like the bikes sounded weird or anything. But I will, just now that I mentioned the bike, I guess, I will agree with you that I thought the bike was going to be a much bigger focus of this movie. And sorry folks, it's just a bike.
Yeah. But that still does not mean that that doesn't mean that I don't want it. I don't like bikes. I don't ride motorcycles. I never will. But I want that bike.
Yeah, it's a cool bike. But yeah, it's literally just that he likes his bike a lot. That's that whole plot point with the bike.
Yep, it's his bike. That's about it.
I also
it's
thought
in Ready Player One more than it's in Akira, probably.
And it probably had more significance in Ready Player One than it has in this movie. I also, just as a side point, I thought that the way, and this is totally a product of its time, so it's not negating anything for my score, but I definitely feel like you could not be as rude to the women in the movie as they were in this movie. Like whenever a girl got in the way, they would just be like, "Shut up, get on."
Yeah,
And
it's a little dated in that regard. Yeah,
yeah, but I mean, it doesn't take away from the movie, especially. I mean, you're watching an older film, so it fits. But I just, especially after a while, I started to notice that it was just like very cut and dry, mean.
yes,
Sometimes, like,
especially Tetsuo to his girlfriend, and then just welcomes her back.
yeah,
Like towards the end. So it's kind of like, is this an abusive, toxic relationship? Maybe. And don't forget the part where her shirt is ripped off for no reason.
no, that's just the animator got horny.
Yeah, and she's what they're supposed to be like, what, 15 or something like that.
Oh, I don't know. I
They're
guess
in
that
high
makes
school.
sense. Yeah, they are.
So that was weird.
Could be a super senior. We'll count her as a super senior in high school.
If that's how you want to justify it, go right ahead.
Because that would ideally make her 18. But yeah, I think that was unnecessary. There was a lot of just kind of like, I don't want to say like grotesque stuff that was unnecessary, but just like stuff that didn't need to be in it. The movie could have stood on its own without them. But one thing I did want to talk about that was kind of crazy and grotesque is the final scene where his body starts to grow into like this big blob creature, and he's inside asking for help because he's still there.
Yeah.
He's just, and I thought that was such a cool visualization of the power overwhelming. Usually when we get that in today's films, the power overwhelms and that person just dies or they explode. And this was like, no, the power is actually like bigger than him. It is growing, it is multiplying, and he is stuck inside trying to control it, and he can't.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really cool portrayal and a really good scene.
And also, speaking more on the kind of treatment of women in this film, I think Calorie is the name of his girlfriend or something along those lines.
There was Kari
Or something like that. Anyhow, she just like dies. Like in like when because she's brought into that thing and she's just like crushed and it's like they didn't. It's just again it's just adding to that complaint of like they kind of mistreat women in this movie.
Well, yeah, and then he's like, she's gonna die, she's dying, and then you see her, and then she dies, and then that's it.
Yeah,
It's all she gets. It is borderline an off-screen death for a very main character.
main to Tetsuo's storyline. Yeah,
But I guess
So-
for half, I mean, definitely goes on the adventure and all that stuff, and the rescue mission
It's
and all
not
that.
Kay.
No,
Kay is
But doesn't-
different.
yeah, isn't
No,
she the one that
the
goes
girl
on?
that dies is Tetsuo's girlfriend, not
Yeah.
the guy that's working with the girl that's working with.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
the
my
one,
bad.
The
I got
one
the
whose
mix-
shirt is ripped off. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's the one.
She's
Who's
the one that
crushed.
died. Yeah.
Not only does she
But
get her
I mean-
shirt ripped off, she's underage. She's half nude for like that scene. She's crushed to death unceremoniously for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all that stuff kind of. There's a lot of that, but I really did enjoy the scene where Akira comes back, and even though it makes no sense really, he like forms another like a little human body, and then I just loved the slow motion explosion scene. That like build up and them saying like we all three of us have to go in to save him. That whole sequence and then inside the explosion with all the buildings like blowing up and flying around and him standing on pieces of rubble that are flying through the air. It was really incredible. And I did not expect to see something so engaging
And very original too.
and very original looking in a movie this old. I really didn't. It looks dang good.
Yeah, and kind of building more on that, the thing that I always hear from people on YouTube comments and just everywhere I've seen talked about this movie say to read the manga, because if the film is a classic, the manga is a masterpiece.
Yeah, well, you can see there. So I actually, where's my finger? Right here. That's the Alita Battle Angel set. Right there. And after I finish that, my next thing is I want to get the set for Akira. It looks
nice,
really good.
But I mean, that's all I really got to say about the movie. What anything else you got before we wrap it up? Give some scores.
No, I guess the last thing I could say is that it did not stand up to the giant movie that I thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
It did fall a little bit short, and a little bit of that was just that the plot being split into two adventures for a good chunk of the movie really felt odd to me.
Mm-hmm.
Following the two different heroes, quote, villain kind of thing, and jumping back and forth. And they tied them in every once in a while, and that was okay. But the movie had kind of one of those ending moments halfway through the film where they meet back up and there's a big kind of battle and all that. And then all that. So the movie kind of felt a little too long to me. I feel like it could have ended sooner. But that's just, it may be a product of the time that we absorb things so much faster now. So I can't knock it for that. Just a point that I feel like it did get a little bit drawn out.
I was going to say, we just talked about this in our Lawrence of Arabia episode, and we're like, oh, long is not a bad thing. And it's like...
Well, but that's a different type of movie completely, right?
Oh,
I mean, it depends per case, for sure. I'm never one for example, for Avengers, make that thing 4 hours long, man. I'll watch every single minute of it because I want to build the story. This one, I felt that the story just could have been condensed a little bit. There were a lot of scenes that we've talked about here that just didn't really need to be in it. They were, I guess, maybe nice to have, but they didn't need to be.
Yeah.
And I just felt it was a little drawn out towards the end, but the final scene definitely makes up for it. Worth the wait, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So some final thoughts and some scores. I feel like we've given some pretty decent thoughts about the movie. But any final thoughts before you give your score?
My final thought is if you're into kind of founding movies or like firsts, for sure, this is definitely one to watch. It's going to be talked about first all the time, so I definitely think it's worth seeing if you're into this kind of thing. But I mean, it didn't live up to the absolute hype that I had been hearing about for a decade. And because of that, I gave this movie an 86.
86. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's fun. I think it's more interesting to me than it was mind blowing. I think I was just more interested in the animation style, not necessarily the plot. I was more watching it for like all the little details and kind of, again, those firsts I was looking for. But I feel like it didn't hold up on the plot to me.
Fair enough. I'm in the same boat. I think that the plot kind of does fall a little, falter a little bit, especially towards the latter half. I'm a huge fan of the world building, though. I'm a huge fan of the animation, and I think it's a very creative film. I do think the behind the scenes reason, I guess you could say, for it standing the test of time and being such an inspiring piece of animation is definitely warranted. I do think it's one of the best animations I've ever seen, but as a complete film, I think that it doesn't live up. Again, it doesn't fully live up to the hype. Because we can't just look at it because it's a cool movie. We also have to look at it because of the story and the characters and the unfortunate treatment of women in this movie. Which, again, it's a product of the time, but it still makes it a little uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, we're really close. I gave it an 82.
Nice.
It is very strong, but I don't think the plot holds up all that well. Animation, again, is just absolutely fantastic, though.
Yeah, if you just want to watch it for literally a master class on what hand-drawn animation looks like, this is the movie. I mean, it is absolutely phenomenal.
If you need a reminder for why we need hand-drawn animation still and not just cheap 3D animation, please watch this.
Yeah, it's incredible. It really is. That's what made up 82% of my score, is just the animation alone and how incredible it was.
Absolutely. But that is going to bring us to an end for our first timers episode. Adrian, something tells me there's some people out there who don't know where they can find us online or maybe follow us for more information. Where can they do that?
Well, if you don't know where to find us, let me tell you this little secret. We are on all social media at the Drive Back Podcast. You can find us pretty much anywhere by searching that. We are active on Instagram. We just started our TikTok, so we expect to see some stuff there. You can find us here on YouTube, where you can see our beautiful faces and we can talk to you. But yeah, we love hearing from you guys. I mean, we love suggestions. We love responding to comments and just talking with you guys on the day-to-day, as well as taking your suggestions on movies. I mean, we can't watch them all, so if you want us to watch something in particular, let us know, and we'll do our best to make that happen. But yeah, go ahead and subscribe, and then hit the bell, because we do post up here on YouTube and on all podcasting apps every Monday. So you can always catch a new review or a new discussion or a new guest conversation or a new interview. We always have something going on every week, so make sure to go ahead and hit the bell so you get notified, and we hope to see you there.
Absolutely, yeah. Like, comment, subscribe. Give us more things, more movies to watch. I mean, we can't watch them all. We can watch a lot, and we're going to have to watch a lot for 2 weeks from now. You'll see what we mean. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. This episode should be coming out on, what is it? I think it's going to be, whatever. It's still the beginning of June, so everyone out there, happy Pride Month. Make sure you're celebrating. Remember that love is love, no matter who you are. And we will see you next time on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.